Fantastic. Hey, everyone. Welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here and
Martin here.
There we go. We didn't let you know we were filming
No.
because that was awesome. I didn't want to put you on the spot, you see. Brilliant.
All right.
And we also have the wonderful Lee sat off in the corner and, Mr. Anderton himself.
more on that in a sec. We were going to talk about Martin Kidd, the history of Victory Amplifiers and all the rest of that, but I don't think we need to. I think
That'll do.
that says it all, doesn't
Thank
it?
you, lineman. Thank you, ball boys.
That's all right. Can I go now?
Wow, that's amazing.
Welcome.
For those of you who don't know, Martin Kidd, who is chief designer at Victory Amplifiers and has a long history in British amplifiers and indeed other amplifiers, which we're going to talk about here and there. This section, we're going to focus on two relatively new things from Victory. It's the MK series, which is very exciting because, again, the history will be covered in the rest of this video. But MK, Martin Kidd, I want to spare your blushes, Martin, but it seems utterly fitting that your name reappears on an amplifier, your initials, because we feel you have a signature sound and something that is uniquely you in a market that's so awash with amps that are just desperate to sound like something else.
Oh, that's good.
Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the genesis of the MK series and how it came to be.
How it came to be? Well, it was, to begin with, we spoke at Victory about celebrating Victory's 10th anniversary.
Wow.
And so we thought we should come up with a couple of amplifiers, go back to the hand-wired thing. And we were sort of chatting about what should we make? And we threw some ideas around and various amps we might like to make something that sounds like that or does this or has got this feature. And then it was suggested prior, in fact, probably long before our 10th anniversary, a couple of years before or so, that I should revisit the Cornford MK50 design. And so I did. That was it in a nutshell. And I just wanted to include any things I'd learnt on my way. That's really how both of them came about. But the MK Overdrive was, it's born of an MK50 with some extra voicing switches and taking trying to remember my mental notes from 20 years ago about what people might have liked in the MK50 that it didn't offer.
Right.
It is, I feel like, obviously we have the great benefit of hindsight now, so we can look back over the past few decades and kind of put the amp in context, put your amps in context as they've sat alongside, Marshalls, Boogies, some of the bigger names. And it feels to me like the Overdrive part of the MK50 is kind of your heart in the amp.
Yeah.
What inspired that? Like what kind of makes you go, this is the Overdrive sound we need?
I started modifying amps, and I wanted something that would make life easier for me. Sound. One of the things I noticed in my early gigging days is if I were to play in a club or a pub where everybody's standing at the same level,
right,
and I would walk out to where the front row of the audience might be, and some of them might stand directly in line with my speaker cabinet, and a lot of the development was to be kind to their ears and their eyebrows and their tooth enamel, because I could stand, and I think that sounds horrible, actually, that modification. So I'd go back and I'd end up with all the treble turned off and the mid back at about 10 o'clock. And that was really what started me really paying attention. So I think I knew how to get stuff sounding good at home, and then I'd take it to a gig, and it's much like a bedroom guitar player.
You get to the gig, you get to level, and it's like everything changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so that was, I learnt, a great way to learn, because you could literally take it out. There would be weeks where I wouldn't do a gig, and I'd do a gig with a circuit, but never again. I'd have a different circuit by tomorrow night and the following night or whatever. So it was a great way to hone the the sound but it was only personal to me. It's what I liked.
So it's interesting, right? We have a lot of designers, engineers on the show who are great players. You're a great rock guitar player, and when I hear you play through that, I can hear where it's been informed that it needs to sustain, it needs to have the right attack, but it can't be shrill. It needs to sound musical. So I completely get all that, and also there's definitely that Cornford element that I hear in this that I haven't heard in the other parts of the Victory series before.
No.
So, but I'm really interested to understand the clean and where your inspiration for the clean amp came from.
Right. Well, that's an interesting one. It was listening, mixing with the likes of you lot, mixing with people that didn't play the same gigs as I did, or the same style, and on occasion having a go on their gear and thinking, right, I think I'm beginning to understand what, rather than just a sound that doesn't distort. That's only the very first stage. You still want the guitar not to fight back. You don't, and you want some harmonic content. You don't want it to. You don't want distortion. There is distortion. Sure. There's low level distortion in there, but it's not overtly crunchy or, even on the edge of breakup, hardly. But there is some of this harmonic content, and just an amp that was loud and clean, but not sterile. Didn't feel sterile or stiff or hard work, because then you're reliant on devices, compressors, overdrives, what have you, just to make your life a bit easier. Yeah. And also,
like an easy life.
We do. We like an easy life. And sometimes I think a very sterile or clean amp, the dynamic range is enormous. And if you're not on your game, then that's what your audience is going to hear.
That's what they hear, isn't it? We've discussed this before, haven't we? Where that idea of a ultra clean sound is not enjoyable. No, not in a guitar sense anyway. Because even if you think about some of your favourite clean sounds down history, they're not. Listen to them. They have harmonics. They have extra stuff in there that's not perfectly clean.
Yeah,
no, and that's why we like them, because we can. It sounds clean. I mean, probably even Hank Marvin, dare I say?
Yeah.
There's some nice stuff going on.
Oh,
in
completely.
There. And Mark Knopfler, you think those are clean sounds, but there's something quite nice.
Yeah, those amps are working. They're delivering some loveliness.
Yeah, they are, and it's allowing you to play the amp as well as your guitar. You've got a dynamic range which isn't such that if you play a note quietly, people think you haven't played it at all. So you haven't got that problem, but you've then got touch sensitivity.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of stuff that ideally you want to.
That whole
encourage.
idea of amp as instrument is. I don't want to get into being pejorative about the younger generation, but it is lost on a lot of new players because you never get to play at a significant volume, and that interaction of guitar and amp that you learn if you have the luxury of being able to play loud a lot is a completely different game, isn't it? And I think it sort of tees into the question, which is 2 new 100-watt amps in 2024.
Yes.
What are you on?
Well, I'll tell you later. It's very nice. Yeah. Well, yes, that's one might ask what on earth are you doing, but it was some of the people I was talking to. 100 watts was 100 watts. If you just hear 100 watts, it's not quite as loud as you think. It's what on earth goes on. If you could actually measure the peaks and the transients coming out of a 100-watt guitar amp, you'd be horrified, I would imagine.
But I guess a lot of people hear that and think, man, I can't play a 5-watt amp at home. Where on earth will I use 100 watts? But actually, it's the dynamic level that is capable with 100-watt amplifiers. I mean, we've all been to gigs where you can hear that the guitar player just doesn't have any more to give. I've certainly seen enough of them. It's like they sound great in the studio and they sound great at home, but actually if you've got a loud drummer and you turn up with a 12-watt amp, it's just not great. No. But the 100 watts, it means that you can choose your dynamic level.
Yes.
Yeah,
weight,
I love that.
It's weight.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. You lean into it when it's required.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, there are any number of YouTube videos of comparisons between 50 and 100-watt amplifiers. It is more about the feel and the harmonic content than the volume.
Nice.
100%.
Yeah. We're going to listen to some sounds and stuff. We're also going to have a really enlightened conversation.
Yeah, a discussion that will just put some context around everything that to date, because we have an unusual, the four of us, Lee's off camera, we have an unusual connection over the last 10 years or so that has become incredibly important to all of us. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Well, this is a meeting of
minds.
Four people who have some collective history. It starts around Victory amplification. And we need to rewind to about 2013.
Or 12.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah. Thereabouts, yes.
So, Lee, maybe you could pick us up on how Victory was born.
Yeah. So if we go back to 2012, 2013, I think what's interesting is everyone around the table knew who the other three were, but I don't think they had really met them properly.
Yeah, true.
So obviously I'd been doing Andertons for ages, and one of my favourite guitar amp lines that we sold was Cornford, and Cornford got into some difficulties and stopped making amplifiers. And
Cornford was big in the UK though, right? It was like relatively, because I used to see them all the time. I remember in the early days of Giggery, we had people come in with their Cornford amplifiers, and that was I don't know, it was like outside of Europe and America, but certainly in the UK they seem to be everywhere.
I mean, it was being built in the UK, and in my time of selling, well, Martin will know this, obviously it went from Martin physically building the amplifiers in his shed or in a shed to a manufacturer, straight edge manufacturing. Mass producing them is probably not the right word, but building them in more significant quantities.
And just to nail it on, you designed the Cornford amplifiers.
Yes.
Yes. There we go.
Yeah. I don't know that Cornford was ever more than just two people, was it? It was just you and Paul, wasn't it? Paul did the sort of sales and marketing, and you did the design.
I did the design, and then at any one time we had, there was a couple of other chaps worked with me that would build the amplifiers, and then we would have somebody doing the books and answering the phone, taking repeat
but the
orders.
sound design and the concept of the amplifiers, that's you.
That's from in here.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So we by this time we're doing 6 figures a year of Cornford business. Wow. So it was a decent amount.
£6.
Yeah. I honestly don't recall. Paul was very much the face. So if you went to a Cornford stand at a music show or whatever like that, it'd be Paul, and he was very sort of, he was a character, so a likable character. Anyway, there was the demise of Cornford, and I don't really know why, to be honest with you. I think because it was just a big line for Andertons, I just thought, there must be there just felt like a void, a gap of something. So I didn't know Martin at the time, but I did know who the factory was that were building them. So I contacted the factory and began a sort of a friendship, I suppose, with 2 or 3 of the guys from the factory, Ian, who owns it, and Simon, who runs it, and a couple of the other guys as well. And what came out of that was this: they had a hole in their books, because obviously they were contracted to make these amplifiers, and so that customer had stopped ordering them. I had a hole in my books that were like, well, we used to sell these things. So there was a sort of a meeting of minds of like, well, how could we fill that hole? Martin, at this point, I believe I'm right in saying, had already joined that manufacturer as a sort of a consultant or technician, or
I would be given. In fact, I think probably towards the end of the Cornford production, I was. So some of those, the straight edge ones, are built by me. So I did some, probably about 2 dozen, I should think. Wow. Yeah, something like that. So we, I wouldn't say quickly, but over the space of 6 months or so, and I think largely because of friendships that were forming, rather than necessarily any sense that this wasn't financially motivated. Their factory was just fine. They're building for loads of other brands. Anderton's is fine. We're selling loads of other stuff, but there was a friendship and an opportunity. And so,
but also, you have been a champion of British-made musical stuff for a long time, and that was certainly the start of our relationship.
Yeah,
because you would call and say, "Hey,
I think I'm interested." Beneath the, I have come to really enjoy understanding how guitars are made and amps are made and pedals are made, and obviously with my Anderton's hat on, I don't really get to fulfill any of that. We're buying a finished product and doing the sort of sales and marketing side of things. So we decide, I'm pushing this all into, we go, let's start an amp brand then.
Yeah.
We have an amp designer, we have a factory, and we have somebody that could sell them.
Yeah. And that's important, isn't it? Because you've got the 2 hardest things to do when you start an amp brand, making them and selling them, which might sound a completely obvious thing to say, but they're the hardest things.
It really does. Yeah. And
let's hear some sounds. I think we should start with the Overdrive again, because it just sounded mega.
It does.
So we've got a clean channel, Overdrive 1 and Overdrive 2 in the MK Overdrive.
Yes.
Plus some other tone shaping buttons and switches.
There's a couple of voice. There's a voice switch on the clean channel and the Overdrive channel. So you can, if you like a slightly more aggressive modern sound, you might find it. And on the clean channel, it's just there's a bit more upper mid. Might suit a sort of to bring out the Telecaster-ness of a Telecaster, perhaps.
We're going to suggest you go and watch the Victory official demos to go for a full feature rundown. But I think what might be fun is if we just have at it and dial some sounds up and see where we are. Yeah. I want to start with that sound you started with at the beginning, because to me, right, that's got it's got a bit of Yngwie, it's got a bit of Van Halen. It's definitely classic hard rock lineage, yet absolutely chock full of harmonics.
Yeah, it's definitely an amp overdrive.
Am I in the right ballpark?
Yes,
there?
indeed.
Does that inspire you?
Absolutely. Well, indeed. I could talk about the amps that, had I been allowed to play as loud as I wanted, I probably would. It's perhaps not likely that I'd have got into modifying amps.
Okay.
Because I may have done, but there were certain amplifiers of yesteryear that I still refer to. Can I say them?
Yeah, Plexis, presumably.
Well, certainly. They some of the nicest sounds for me personally have come from. I was saying to Lee earlier, one of my the first Marshall I ever bought was a 1968 it started life as a Plexi 50. So 2 EL34s and a valve rectifier. There aren't many of them.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, there aren't many of them about. So they're sort of interim between the JTM 45 and the 50-watt Super Lead.
Yeah.
And that was wonderful. But I used to get told off if I played too loud. And so I would have horrible devices on the floor that...
Easy.
No, I didn't mention the P word. But if you'd have been there, you'd agree with me, or at least how I was going
But
about.
even then, you're looking for overdrive from the amp.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah, because you were turning it up to get the amp working to a point where it was doing all the stuff that we're hearing.
I'd want that.
And because it was too loud, you said, "No, I'm not going to stick anything. I'm going to mod the amp."
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
amazing.
that was the best for me. That was the nicest overdrive. Yeah. And then a few years after I'd been building and modifying amps for quite some time, a chap came to Cornford with a bunch of amps that he would like us to service, and he had one of these Marshalls
wicked.
again, but a really nice, clean, it hadn't really been tampered with very much. And it reminded me it was just the best amp there, and it was just that lovely. You could do, I would think, almost everything and just from the guitar volume.
So normally what we do in videos is we start clean and go really overdriven, but today we're going to go in reverse. We're just going to have at it and just dial in some sounds and start there. So what we heard first was MK Overdrive in the Overdrive channel on gain 2.
I think so, yes.
I think we should go back. Just to explain the board, all the stuff you can see in pedal cam is going into the front of the amps if we want, but because the MK Overdrive is running overdriven, we have a duplicate delay and reverb on the floor behind me. You can probably see it down there, maybe not, in the loop of the amp, because it just sounds much cleaner that way. So we'll head back to that.
Beautiful.
And because it is that pedal show, yes, we have 2 CXM 78s and etc. Come on then.
All right, here we go.
I'm going to make some more noise.
Yeah,
please.
Go at it.
You could indeed go away and have a bite.
I
Dan,
could. Yes, mate.
I've got to switch you onto that sound.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to Overdrive 1
Okay.
just to get to a bit less gain. Let's see how the telly
Okay.
loves this.
That's beautiful. It's very rare that I hear an amplifier that has a dirty channel and a clean channel where both channels work.
That's right.
Inevitably, there's always a compromise somewhere. But that's a great clean sound, and that dirty sound is immense.
Yeah.
Really cool.
It is. It definitely has an overdrive voice that's distinctly not boogie-like.
Yeah.
No.
Not all smooth and kind of as lovely as that is, and for the boogie devotees out there, definitely not all smooth in that way, but also not kind of. Sometimes plexi can be such hard work.
Yeah.
Because it's like
Yeah.
all the time, unless you've got crazy pickups and you are Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yep.
And then that works like
not
that.
many people are they?
But there's edge, there's aggression, and I'm so pleased that you were playing it using humbuckers, because that's a kind of style of playing that Dan and I just not really. I thought this was going to die with the heavy overdrive sound. It sounded flipping great.
It really did.
Really killer. Then we came back to the overdrive voice number 1, which was somewhere less than that, and you hopefully would have seen from iPhone cam that I turned the gain down, so it's quite a decent range there. And then we moved to the clean channel with our helpers on the floor to add loads of ambience. And I mean, versatile, man.
Yeah, really cool.
We have an amp designer, we have a factory, and we have somebody that could sell them.
Yeah. And that's important, isn't it? Because you've got the two hardest things to do when you start an amp brand, making them and selling them, which might sound a completely obvious thing to say, but they're the hardest things.
It really does. Yeah. And I suppose to hand over to you, at this point, the connection that I'd said, I can't remember how this. So you'd left guitarist at this time, or
just gearing up.
I can't remember why. I don't know why we would. We just must have known each other, and we must have been talking about something. Whatever, it might have been social. I don't know, but I think I just knew that you were looking for opportunities to do some product marketing.
Exactly that. So I left guitarist, had a hissy fit, and left.
But you geared up for that though, did you?
Well, I didn't really, because I was gearing up for it because it was very stressful and corporate life and all of that. And I'd sort of fallen out with the senior management because, well, anyway, that doesn't matter. But so I left, and I thought, as video was getting going, because all of a sudden you and Chappers were on YouTube, Mike Hermans was on YouTube. The printed page was becoming less effective than it had been for the last 25 years. And all of a sudden, it's brilliant. Magazines are great, aren't they? But wouldn't it be great if it moved and you could hear it?
Yeah.
So video was the obvious thing. And I was really starting to get into video thanks to like Martin at Future, who we did all the videos with. And I learned a lot about video and I was really into it. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll chuck my well-paying job with a pension and private healthcare and all of that in, and do video production. As you would. And I bought some stuff and kind of got going with it. And then, I don't exactly remember how it happens, but you were like, do you want to help with Victory? And I was like, yes, that would be great. So that was my first, and that enabled me. In fact, I do have to say thank you publicly, Lee, because when I left my job, I was, on my arse basically. And Lee basically said, how can I help? Do you want some work? Blah, blah, blah. And I ended up doing videos with Andertons and all that. But certainly getting the Victory job. And then Catherine and I did that together. Photographs, website.
Are we working together doing Guitar Paradiso before? Is that the connection?
Could be.
I think Paradiso came after.
Oh, was it
after? Yeah, because Pete Honore came after as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So we, relatively quickly, Victory has a first-class guy from the media background, who not only could make fabulous videos, and honestly, still two of my favorite Victory videos everywhere are the one with Glenn that we do down in the catacombs of Bath or wherever that was, or Bristol, and the live video of Guthrie doing in the hotel. Two of my favorite videos. We've got first class, media and marketing. best amp designer I've ever met. Factory that has a, you know, and honestly, I'd had some manufacturing experience with Chapman, and all the headaches are with the factory.
Yeah.
So like having somebody from the factory who wants to be involved as well. And actually my role quite quickly just became less significant because I would just ended up being one of a number of retailers that was prepared to stock them. And I guess the other thing we should say as well, partly through Martin's relationship with him and partly through mine, I think, was convincing Guthrie to effectively stick with us after a torrid. I think he'd had a bit of a falling out with Paul, but you know, we'd convinced him that we would make him amplifiers under this Victory thing, and that was obviously.
I can remember. I distinctly remember that being a linchpin because Guthrie sits again at a pivotal point for all of us because the V30 was developed for him, wasn't it? So that he could have a small lunchbox amp, and Victory kind of took the lunchbox concept, which had already been established, but absolutely ran with it. There wasn't a lunchbox amp at that point that was that visceral and that, with due respect to all the other lunchbox amp manufacturers, that flipping serious. And Guthrie's taken it on tour all the way around the world. Fast forward to that hotel in Guildford.
In Guildford, yeah.
Daniel.
So this is the launch, right?
Yeah.
And I get a phone call from Mick saying, Guthrie's going to play the launch. And we've got five amps?
4 or 5, wasn't it? Because it was the...
Yes.
It was all the original. So just winding back, end of year one of Victory, we've got effectively a range of handmade amplifiers that are all pretty expensive. And Guthrie had played them on the Stephen Wilson tour, and we'd had a little bit of interest, but we were straight out the back competing with, you know, expensive amp brands. And actually by the end of that year, going nowhere. You know, it was a vanity project at this stage. And bless him, Guthrie had said, I love this big amplifier, but that's not practical to do 90% of the gigs I do. Can you make it small? Right. Martin makes it small. Guthrie likes it. We announce it. We take 400 orders for that amplifier like the week it's announced.
I shoot the demo video in my basement.
Literally, and all of a sudden Victory goes from a loss-making vanity project to a business. But and part of Guthrie endorsing the small amp meant that we then had the show at the Harbour Hotel, which was him demonstrating all the amplifiers. Okay. So anyway,
so because I built Guthrie's rig for the Stephen Wilson tour using that Victory amplifier. And I think it had pirate logos and something on there. It was like
probably did.
Yeah.
We used to change that like almost every
but it was an epic sounding thing. So Stephen's there with his like Bad Cats. And Guthrie's there with the Victory, and that honestly, they sounded incredible.
He was using the V100, wasn't he?
The V100.
V100 was going back to what you guys have just played today. The V100 was a very early version of what obviously now the MK OD is.
Amazing. So I get a phone call from Mick when this is happening. You guys have launched the amp. He says, "Oh, Guthrie's coming down and he's going to do the launch. He needs to switch between 5 amplifiers." I'm like, yeah, no problem. Says, yes, but he does have some effects in front and some in the effects loop. And we need you to be able to switch between 5 amplifiers with his pedal board.
Which I thought was easy.
And by the way, he's not getting there until 10 minutes before he's going to start. So I got hold of you and I came down and met you and just took some measurements and stuff to make sure I knew what I was dealing with and a bunch of transformers and stuff to isolate everything. But so I built the rig so Guthrie could turn up and then switch between the amplifiers, use the amp gain as well as his pedals and stuff, with those 5 amplifiers with that earth loops and stuff. But that night was the first night I met Catherine, Mick's wife, who is instrumental in doing what we do here. But it was the first time I'd ever seen a video from Mick. And it was the spark of what ends up being that pedal show.
Totally.
So it's crazy, right?
Because given that I'd done that work for you guys, Dan's like, maybe you can help me in my business too. So
because I saw that video and I thought, man, that's a 20 grand video. Because I dipped my toe into it, and I thought, oh, okay, because what we do is very hard. You know, we make a box that costs £1,000 and doesn't make any noise. You know, great one. But it's like I knew the value of video because I could explain what everything happened, but I just was so crap at doing it. When I saw Mick's video, it was so beautiful. I thought, okay, please help. But that was the start of us working together. And, you know, so without that night and everything, it could be a very different story.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be here because that was actually the first time we'd worked together, wasn't it? I can't remember. Was that Movember when we did the Movember video with the Cloncher challenge? It was kind of
around that. It was around that. I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a nice story.
It is.
It is a nice story that it's all tied together. I think, and I guess congrats, because it's 10 years, right? Over 10 years now.
Yeah.
12 years now.
Amazing.
Should we have a bit of clean fun?
Yes,
then?
please.
Good,
I'm
clean
really
fun.
keen to get into this.
I had a quick play of this before we got going today. I did play some of the prototypes, which we will discuss in the other discussion. Dan, would you mind just playing for a bit?
Yes.
What I find interesting about this is that we can do this with EQ because of the various switches and the brights. So you can go really super bassy, and it's almost like you've got just
Almost
like a
like
huge tilt in there.
Wow.
Yeah,
Have a listen.
I will.
That's just the amp, just the reverb in the amp.
Yeah, there's no pedals
Nothing
on
on.
anywhere. What's interesting about that is, so bright switch, number one, you heard it get bright. There's also a bass shift switch, which just fills out that low end, which we'll hear in a minute when we go wet dry. It just gets like tons and tons. There's also a mid focus, or at least something that changes the mid.
Voice, yes. And it does, it's a thing I have included on the clean channel of the MK Overdrive. It just allows more upper mid through the treble control.
Okay.
So I know what that's going to work with.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because obviously, right, if we're talking about clean guitar sounds in the modern idiom, there's a certain man who looms fairly large, who likes the in-between positions. But without that mid focus, when you're in the on the position 4 there, it gets really super sparkly and lovely. I think adding the mid back in. So there on the neck pickup, it's really kind of middly.
That sounds ace.
And then the bright switch, right? Probably too much for this guitar. If you really like that. Too much for me, bright-wise. Pushing the mid up a bit then. And then just before I get out of the way...
Yeah, come on.
You know, you mentioned, here's what's freaky that I always find about the 2 amps, because I've been watching the decibel meter the whole time. The Overdrive, despite sounding massive, was nothing like as loud as you thought it was.
Yeah.
And the clean,
way louder.
Unbelievably loud.
The reason I was just looking...
sounding unpleasant.
I think we were... the reason I was looking over there is because I think I probably clipped one of the mic inputs there, because the transient, and I remember this when we were listening to some of the prototypes, the transient is mad.
Yeah.
I said this to Dan after we came back from listening, that I think it's the fastest transient I've heard in a clean amp.
Yeah. I probably overdid it there, didn't I?
No.
That sounds
at
amazing.
least if there's nothing like it, there's an alternative.
But also, because you've got the master volume set up, you can just push the front end all the way and soften it up a bit.
Yeah.
Martin, we haven't heard you play do you like clean sounds?
I'll diddle around and then you can either not use it or use it.
I mean, obviously it's a different guitar. Now we're hearing humbuckers, but have a play and I'll just have a fiddle with the amp.
Okay.
As you were playing and you hit a note and the reverb and everything started to overdrive, it was like a bloody super reverb. It was just hearing that bit of extra overdrive at the top there. Is it hurting? You hurting?
No, I'm awake.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to tune this. This. Now it might be, I don't know. Let's just see. Let's just see. So these pickups definitely don't have the grunt of those. I'm just going to turn that volume up a bit. Dig it.
That is killer.
Dig
I just
it.
want to try one thing.
Dig it, dig it, dig it.
Don't touch anything on the app.
Don't even look at it.
That's enough of that. Freaking killer, man.
So
that sounds amazing.
That was with the Klon, right?
With the Klon.
Yeah. It is nice that you can push it a bit. As we were saying earlier about amps just being too sterile if they're clean all the way up. But the way that reverb started overdriving there, it was like, oh. It's...
Yeah. Well, it is I tell you, when I really... There's a couple of times, whenever I hear that sound, it reminds me of... there was a Fleetwood Mac live album, and that was happening. I don't know what amp it was either. It could have been I don't know. But Gary Moore in the, I would say, early 2000s or possibly late 90s. I remember seeing him in Nottingham at the Rock City, and he had I think it was a dual showman head, you know, the one that looks like a combo.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Because it's so massive.
Yeah, but it was that thing, and I think it was deliberate. I think it was after that thing that Peter Green and Danny Kirwan used to get back in that.
And I like it because you can with the mid, as you said, the sweep on the mid control is so much that you get that very nasal, if you want it thick and full.
Yeah.
Or you can go into the other voice, put the mid back a bit, and go for the sort of, because if you think about, and again, when we started the video, we said we're not going for all the classic sounds down the years. However, they are the benchmarks of what we, especially with the clean platform, especially. But you go for that Fender Black Panel mid 60s sound through to the sort of more modern boutique pushed strong mid
range,
and it seems to do all of that.
Yes, it was just because there are so many sounds when I think also partly because a lot of amps are one trick ponies. They're great amps, and the controls, the tone controls are very subtle. And a lot of the sound you actually hear is from the power stage, where there is virtually either a presence control or no tone shaping at all. So you're reliant on the speaker. And so these days, it's been one of those things I've liked to see if I can get an amp to do more than just one thing, and not be dependent on too much volume.
Right.
There are times when you just can't want it. You've just got to have it.
Where we were there, that's kind of hurty.
I reckon that was over 110 dB.
I think we hit 110 at one point. So it's very, very loud. If you're tempted to say, oh God, clean amp that breaks up a bit, we are at 110 dB. It's ferociously loud. So much louder than I would ever get to use a clean sound these days anyway. The other thing to say is that's a 1x12 cab.
Yeah.
Indeed.
The amount of bottom end that's putting out.
It's amazing.
It's very good.
It's really mad. And I guess congrats, because it's 10 years, right? Over 10 years now.
Yeah, 12 years now. It's amazing.
And then there's, I don't know, the slightly moderately awkward conversation of conflict of interests. So then I kick off TPS and stay working for Victory for a while, but then TPS goes crazy. I don't have the time to do it, so I step away. And then, of course, you, Lee, were silent right from the beginning, and we all kind of were, because it's a difficult story to tell, because there was no great conspiracy going on, but at the same time, when you've got your finger in many pies, like if I'm shooting an amp demo for somebody else, I don't necessarily want you to know about it, and they don't want to know that I'm working for you guys, etc., etc.
It was all done. It was all done with what we thought was the right thing to do at the time, wasn't it? You know, you had the contract manufacturer going, well, we build amps for lots of people, so how are they going to feel if they know that we're involved with this other amp? You had me as a retailer going, how are other retailers going to feel if they know I'm built? And for the examples you've just gone, and I think what I can say, hand on heart, looking back, is none of us ever took advantage of any, it was everything was done with the utmost integrity. And I've said on camera before, I sort of, after 3 or 4 years, we would talk regularly about going, we should be more transparent about this, or this sort of stuff, but it just never got round to it. And then it almost became the elephant in the room, didn't it?
Because of the nature of how things get communicated in talking about the internet like it's a new thing, but how things just go wild on the web. But again, I think it's probably fair to say Victory is not the amp brand Anderton's makes the most cash out of, is it?
No, and my, I've been, so Anderton's is amazing. Anderton's has always been and will always be what 90% of my focus is on, and generates 99% of what I earn. And the fun I've had with Chapman and with Victory, and I've bought a share in Burns guitars, and it's all just, I'm interested. I like the sensation of starting something and it feeling like it was good. We all like that, right? Everybody likes that. And the numbers involved in Victory are so I don't even mind saying this like that, my share of Victory on day one was £25,000,
Right.
which, and that's it. That's all I've never been employed. I've never been paid a salary. Mm-hmm. Some years there's a profit share. Some years there isn't, and honestly, in the whole grand scheme of everything I've earned out of Victory in the 12 years it's been going is probably pretty fair based on a £25,000 investment in the first place.
That might sound like a lot of money to some people, but just to put that into context, just do a few sums on getting a company off the ground.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, to be fair, the same, we started Chapman with no money.
Yeah.
And actually, I suppose, probably Burns has been a more significant investment and hasn't even got off the ground yet. So, and yes, and relative to the sort of numbers that are involved in running something like Anderton's, it's all, it's not, and I don't think it is for any of us, right? Mm. I think all of us sit and go, any money we've earned out of anything we've done is almost just a happy accident, isn't it? Yeah. It's just we'd be doing this if the.
If TPS was about numbers and about as much money as we could possibly make, we would not be making the videos that it's not.
Well, again, to bring this back, in fact, because we came down here today because, we wanted to show you guys the MK amplifiers, and then sitting around lunch, you're just going, would we even have all been doing, would this all have been here if it wasn't for
I hadn't made that connection until today.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yes, this is, the reason that we're all sat around this table is because of, that the early days of Victory.
That fateful day.
But again, I think, Mick and I have mentioned this quite often, that your championing of British manufacturing, it has meant so much to the industry here in Britain, and, hats off to you, mate. It's made a real difference.
I suppose I'm so lucky that I get to sort of change hats, because I was saying to you, I was up at Marshall last week. Now you could say on the one hand, obviously, is that a major competitor of Victories? All this kind of, I think we all probably know it's not, but I'm so proud of just being up there and going, it's a super success story as a British manufacturer.
Yeah.
Absolutely killing it on the world stage. Rock and roll music would not be the same if it hadn't been for that.
Even since the acquisition.
More so. I think more as in it's reignited a flame. Fantastic. Terry's back involved again in a way that he probably wasn't before.
Yeah.
But look at them all. We want to see Hiwatt doing well, and Vox doing well, and PJD
Absolutely.
Guitars doing well, and Gig Rig doing well. It's just like, because why not? There's plenty of space at the table for everyone, and I'd rather see the British guys doing well.
Or the original people doing.
Sorry.
The British history of music is epic, and all those brands you mentioned, there's such a massive role to play in it.
In the world industry.
Completely.
Yeah.
And you can't just assume, especially today, they're big brands, they're going to be fine. You know what I mean? It makes a material difference having people championing those brands, and it's it's great.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Epic.
There we are. And isn't it wonderful? Just how it's all friendship at the end of the day, isn't it? Everything sits in. Nothing would have worked. Victory would not have got off the ground. TPS would not have got off the ground
100%.
Had you not gone, I like these guys.
And you can be, I think that the internet especially can be terribly cynical about that and be digging away for conspiracies and all the rest of it, and just trying to find dirt and bad feeling. It is exactly that. I mean, sure, there's a bit of competitive advantage because you have a bit of skill making video, you happen to know a bit about electronics, you own a massive guitar shop, you're flipping brilliant at designing amps. Okay. I mean, if we call that competitive advantage, that's just that's what it is.
That's what it is. But it is. But you've got to. I think there was no business plan, was there? It wasn't like, right, here's this.
No shit.
I just thought I'd point that out just in case you're under any illusion. No, so there wasn't. It was it was, and it's quite nice that a business has grown from that.
Yeah.
You know, just that we started doing this initially. I think we didn't really know what to start with. We wanted to start with the product. We didn't know, and so we decided probably to, for me at least, to pick up. The sensible thing was to pick up where I left off, doing that same kind of thing. And I think perhaps the industry had changed. Perhaps we were unknown, and if we could have dug our heels in and been stubborn for a couple of years, that may have changed. But I think it was Guthrie's desire for something that would go in the overhead locker.
Do you remember that? Literally, I think
the footprint was the first
it was
part of the
the
design
print
brief.
off you got from the EasyJet website about how much you could fit in the overhead locker. That was Martin's design brief, was the print off of what you could put in the overhead locker for EasyJet, and like 2 lines from Guthrie about how he wanted the distortion channel to work, or something like that.
It wasn't.
Can you design that, please, Martin?
Yes.
And in fairness, you smashed that out in about 2 weeks, I think, or 3 weeks, because it was really, there was a deadline for a show in the Far East that Guthrie wanted to do.
Yes, there was something like that. And he took I think he took 1 of 2 prototypes and then came back with feedback. So he actually had the confidence in us. To say,
go straight out there.
I'm going to go out there with this thing and then come back with it. It's not quite loud enough.
And, I also want to say, because I do want to just, you know, I'm not employed. I get these days out with Martin. I love spending time with Martin. But you know, there's Anthony and Amy in sales. There's Ashley and Alex in artist relations. There's Chris doing product marketing. Dan doing marketing. Simon managing the whole, you know, it's like
it's a business aside from what you
do. It's like I genuinely I'm super proud of seeing it, and I just get to basically dib in and out and have the fun days out like this one, you know.
And all these years later, you're back making 100-watt amplifiers. We're moving in the right direction, people.
And come to see us jokers again.
Full circle.
Last question, Mark, do you obviously in the early days, I know you've done a lot of what would you call it, consultant work on a lot of big
done some bits,
and famous brands, which I guess is designing to a brief. Are you finding that you getting to stretch your legs a bit now in terms of design and amps and all that?
Well, there are things that things that people would think, well, that's boring, or that's but I liked having to find out how to get MIDI, how to work, how that all worked.
That was for the Rabia's amp, wasn't it? Yeah.
Because he said, can't we be just easier to add MIDI? And I thought, well, for some people it might, but I haven't got a clue, so I better find out. So that was one. I'll cite that as a quite an enjoyable thing. You know, a part of the being at Victory was just learning. That was something else that I never thought I'd learn, because it's digital electronics. It's nothing to do with audio. It's switching all the.
And did you get into that and work it out?
Yes.
Legend.
So yes, I sat there for about 6 weeks looking at videos.
You're terribly modest.
You are modest.
Because I think we probably haven't. You know, Martin's had a dual role, so he is obviously Victory's chief designer, but also works still as a technical consultant for the manufacturer. And you know, if we had your TPS klaxon in here, we could name drop some. We could name drop some pretty big brands.
You'd run the battery out
with people who've come to you over the last 10 years and gone, "Can you just help us solve this problem, please, Martin?"
Yeah, I have done those things, and I won't. They know who they are. But yeah, I've done those things, and it's quite flattering. But I think it's perhaps because they've come to the people I work for, and then they said, "Well, we've got someone that can have a look at that for you, or can do that." So it's quite nice that's a feather in their cap. That we can offer this. So it's quite nice that I, in some way, because I was taken under their wing a bit.
Right.
That's true.
It was true. It is true. And I was taken under their wing, and so I think if it allowed them to offer more in terms of the services they already had, if they could add to that, I'm pleased.
This put add some context to that. Obviously, when Martin left Cornford, obviously was not a great place, was it? In the sense of just financially, whatever, And it was testament, I think, to the character of the people who own that manufacturing business we talk about, who just went, "You better start working for us tomorrow, then, Martin."
We're not going to lose this guy.
Well, not just. I don't even know necessarily that was even the first thought. It was that he'd had a tough time, and needs to be able to pay the mortgage. So it's like, find the guy a job.
It's people again, isn't it?
Yes, it's 100%.
I was almost going to shed a tear because it does. And then all these years later,
this is there's still still
and
good
that's
things
those
flowing from it.
relationships that happen.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Absolutely.
Modest to the end, Martin.
Yes. Is it the end now?
Well, not the end. Not the end.
Can I show off?
I think doff for the cap.
Yeah. Well,
congratulations on the 10 years.
Yeah, well done, guys. It's
and
amazing.
Congratulations on the MKs as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
It is
I'm glad
a particular
you've had a
delight to
listen.
see your initials on those amps.
It is for me too. But I'm glad you liked them. You know, because you've got you spend so much time with gear and testing, comparing. You probably hear stuff I don't, and so it's quite nice when you get somebody discerning that's got a good ear.
This is the first time we've been called that.
Yeah. Been called a lot of things, never discerning.
So put the klaxon on that. Sorry about that. Sorry about the D bomb. But so I like it when somebody knows what they like and they like what I do, then that pleases me.
No,
As you might
really
imagine.
lovely.
I think we should cut to some more tones.
Indeed.
What could be better than one custom order MK amplifier?
2 is better.
2.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we should probably play out on some lovely wet dry sounds, shouldn't we?
Let's do that.
See how you like this. So we'll be using the clean channel in both amps just because we'll be doing stuff in the front end with the pedals you see on the board.
Thank you, linesman. Thank you, ball boys. Good night. That was freaking epic.
Very nice, very good.
Wow.
Smashing.